What is Verity about? Anne Hathaway and Dakota Johnson movie explained. Warning, spoiler warning. This video discusses the premise, trailer reveals, and major mysteries from Verity. Since the movie has not been released yet, some details remain unconfirmed. We'll separate what the trailers and official information establish from what comes from Colleen Hoover's original novel. A new psychological thriller is about to bring together Anne Hathaway, Dakota Johnson, and Josh Hartnett. And the story is already getting people talking. The movie is called Verity, based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling thriller of the same name. At first glance, it looks like a story about a struggling writer getting the opportunity of a lifetime. But that opportunity quickly becomes a nightmare. Dakota Johnson plays Lowen Ashleigh, a writer who is hired to finish the books of a hugely successful author named Verity Crawford, played by Anne Hathaway. The problem is that Verity has been left unable to complete her work after a devastating accident. So Lowen is invited into the Crawford family's secluded home to continue the best-selling series. And that's when she discovers something she was never supposed to see. Hidden among Verity's papers is a disturbing manuscript that appears to reveal horrifying secrets about the Crawford family. Suddenly, Lowen has to ask herself one terrifying question. Is she reading fiction, or is she reading the truth? Let's break down what Verity is actually about. 1. Who is Lowen Ashleigh? Lowen Ashleigh is the character played by Dakota Johnson. She's a struggling writer who hasn't achieved the level of success she hoped for. Then she receives an extraordinary opportunity. Verity Crawford is one of the biggest authors in the world, but after an accident leaves her unable to finish her best-selling series, someone needs to complete the remaining books. Lowen is hired as the ghostwriter. For her, this could completely change her career. She could suddenly become connected to one of the biggest literary franchises in the world. But there's a catch. She has to move into the Crawford family home and study Verity's work closely. And the deeper Lowen gets into Verity's world, the more uncomfortable things become. 2. Who is Verity Crawford? Verity Crawford is the famous author at the center of the story, played by Anne Hathaway. Before the accident, Verity was enormously successful. She's the kind of writer whose books have millions of readers waiting for the next installment. But now, her career is effectively frozen. She can't finish the series herself. That's why Lowen enters the picture. At first, Verity might appear to be simply a successful writer who has suffered a terrible accident. But the more Lowen learns about her, the more complicated Verity becomes. Because there are things about Verity's past that don't seem to fit together. And eventually, Lowen discovers writing that completely changes the way she sees this woman. 3. Why does Lowen move into the Crawford house? This is one of the most important parts of the setup. Lowen isn't simply given a manuscript and told to finish the book from her own home. She moves into the Crawford estate so she can work closely with Verity's existing material. That means she is suddenly living inside the world of the family she's supposed to write about. And that creates a very uncomfortable situation. She's surrounded by Verity's books, Verity's belongings, Verity's husband, Verity's children, and eventually, Verity herself. The house becomes almost like another character in the story. The further Lowen explores it, the more secrets she finds. 4. Who is Jeremy Crawford? Jeremy Crawford, played by Josh Hartnett, is Verity's husband. He's also the father of their children. And his relationship with both Verity and Lowen becomes extremely important. At first, Jeremy appears to be dealing with the aftermath of an unimaginable family tragedy. His wife is unable to continue her career. His family has already suffered devastating losses. And now a stranger has entered their home to take over his wife's work. But Lowen gradually becomes emotionally involved with Jeremy. That creates another layer of tension. Because Lowen isn't simply investigating Verity's secrets anymore. She's becoming personally connected to the family. And that makes everything she discovers much more dangerous. 5. What does Lowen discover? This is where Verity changes from a simple literary drama into a psychological thriller. Lowen discovers what appears to be an unfinished autobiographical manuscript written by Verity, and the contents are disturbing. The manuscript appears to describe events from Verity's life that are deeply unsettling. It contains shocking revelations about her relationship with Jeremy, and even more disturbing material involving their family. Lowen initially has no idea whether she should believe what she's reading. Maybe Verity really wrote it. Maybe it's an extremely dark piece of fiction. Maybe it's an attempt to explore fictional characters. Or maybe it's a confession. And that uncertainty becomes the central mystery. 6. Is Verity telling the truth? This is arguably the biggest question in the entire movie. The manuscript appears to tell Lowen things about Verity that nobody else knows. But there's an obvious problem. How can Lowen prove that any of it is real? Verity is already unable to communicate normally after her accident. So Lowen can't simply confront her and ask, "Did you really do these things?" Instead, Lowen has to interpret the evidence herself. And the more she reads, the harder it becomes to separate fiction from reality. That's exactly what makes the story so unsettling. The audience is placed in the same position as Lowen. We don't necessarily know who to trust. 7. The relationship between Lowen and Jeremy. The story also becomes much more complicated because of Lowen's relationship with Jeremy. Lowen begins to develop feelings for him, and Jeremy is also dealing with his own complicated relationship with Verity. This creates a dangerous emotional triangle. Lowen is supposed to be there for one reason, to finish Verity's books. But she's slowly becoming emotionally involved with the very family she's investigating. That means every new discovery has personal consequences. If Verity's manuscript is true, Jeremy may be living with someone far more dangerous than Lowen initially realized. But if the manuscript is fiction, then Lowen may be allowing herself to become trapped inside a story that was never supposed to be real. 8. Why is the movie so psychological? Verity isn't primarily about monsters or supernatural horror. The fear comes from uncertainty. Who is telling the truth? Who is manipulating whom? Can Lowen trust what she reads? Can she trust what she sees? And most importantly, can she trust the people inside the house? That's what makes the story different from a traditional thriller. There isn't necessarily one obvious villain standing in front of the camera. Instead, suspicion constantly moves between the characters. One moment, you might believe Verity is hiding something. Then Jeremy starts looking suspicious. Then Lowen begins making decisions that could put herself in danger. And the audience is forced to keep questioning everything. 9. What does the new movie add? The film adaptation is directed by Michael Showalter, with a screenplay by Nick Antosca. It's being distributed by Amazon MGM Studios, and the current theatrical release date is October 2nd, 2026. The cast is led by Anne Hathaway as Verity Crawford, Dakota Johnson as Lowen Ashleigh, and Josh Hartnett as Jeremy Crawford. The recent trailer has also made the movie's tone much clearer. Rather than presenting Verity as a straightforward mystery about an author, the marketing is emphasizing obsession, attraction, manipulation, and the increasingly blurred boundary between what Lowen discovers and what she believes. That is exactly what made the original story so controversial and discussable. 10. Why is everyone talking about Anne Hathaway? Anne Hathaway's casting is particularly interesting. Verity has to be convincing in two completely different ways. She needs to appear vulnerable enough that viewers might sympathize with her. But at the same time, there needs to be something unsettling underneath that vulnerability. The movie's mystery depends on the audience constantly asking, is Verity really the person Lowen thinks she is? Hathaway's performance therefore becomes crucial. If viewers completely trust Verity, the mystery doesn't work. If viewers immediately believe she's evil, the mystery also disappears. The performance needs to exist somewhere in the middle, and that's exactly what the trailer appears to be playing with. 11. Why is Dakota Johnson's character so important? Lowen is essentially our way into the story. She's discovering everything at the same time the audience is. That's why her character matters so much. She begins as an outsider. She arrives at the Crawford home for a professional opportunity. But gradually, the house begins changing her. The manuscript changes her understanding of Verity. Her relationship with Jeremy changes her emotions. And the secrets she uncovers change the way she sees the entire family. The deeper she goes, the harder it becomes to simply walk away. And that creates the central tension of the movie. 12. Is Verity a horror movie? Not in the traditional sense. It's better described as a psychological thriller with mystery, drama, romance, and disturbing material. The official movie information describes it as a psychological thriller centered on Lowen's discovery of Verity's disturbing writings and the question of what is real. So if you're expecting ghosts, demons, or supernatural creatures, that's not what this story is about. The horror comes from people. Secrets, manipulation, obsession, and the possibility that the person you trust most could be hiding something horrifying. 13. What makes the story's central mystery so powerful? The most interesting thing about Verity is that the mystery isn't simply, what did Verity do? It's, can we believe what we're being told? That's a much more complicated question. A manuscript can be fiction, a confession can be a lie. A person can pretend to be innocent, and someone who appears guilty might actually be telling the truth. Lowen has to make decisions based on incomplete information, and every decision carries a risk. The audience is therefore placed in the same psychological trap. We are constantly encouraged to form an opinion and then question it. 14. What should you expect from Verity? If the trailers are any indication, Verity is going to focus heavily on the tension between Lowen, Verity, and Jeremy. The secluded Crawford home becomes the center of the mystery. Lowen discovers increasingly disturbing information. Her relationship with Jeremy becomes more complicated. And Verity remains at the center of everything, even when she isn't physically capable of controlling the situation in the way she once could. The biggest question will remain the same. Who is telling the truth? And until audiences see the entire movie, it's important not to treat every theory or trailer interpretation as confirmed. Final thoughts. So, what is Verity about? At its core, it's about Lowen Ashleigh, a struggling writer who receives the opportunity to finish the work of famous author Verity Crawford after Verity is left unable to continue writing following an accident. Lowen moves into the Crawford family home. She begins studying Verity's work, and then she discovers a disturbing manuscript that appears to reveal deeply disturbing secrets about Verity, Jeremy, and their family. From there, everything changes. Lowen doesn't know whether she's discovered a genuine confession or an incredibly disturbing piece of fiction. And the more she becomes involved with Jeremy, the more complicated the situation becomes. That's what makes Verity such an intriguing movie topic. It's not simply about discovering a secret. It's about what happens when you can't determine whether the secret is real. Anne Hathaway's Verity sits at the center of that mystery. Dakota Johnson's Lowen becomes the person trying to uncover the truth. And Josh Hartnett's Jeremy becomes another major piece of a puzzle where almost nobody can be completely trusted. The movie is currently scheduled to arrive in theaters on October 2nd, 2026, giving audiences a chance to finally see how Michael Showalter and screenwriter Nick Antosca translate Colleen Hoover's controversial thriller to the big screen. And when you walk into this movie, remember one thing: don't assume you know who the villain is, because the entire point of Verity is making you question what you're seeing, what you're reading, and ultimately, who you should believe.